In this video, we'll be looking at the bursting and distribution of a Tableau TWBX file based on a SQL query from SQL Server, Oracle, or any ODBC compliant database. So we have our databases to begin with here. We have, again, SQL Server, Oracle, any ODBC compliant database. So we have a query that returns columns and rows. From there, we bring that into Tableau and build a workbook. Next, that workbook gets cataloged in InfoBurst. From there, we can schedule a burst in InfoBurst that splits that TWBX file into multiple files based on a specific dimension in that workbook. And from there, we can distribute the resulting TWBX files to a number of different destinations, including email, Tableau Online, SharePoint, and others. Let's briefly have a look at the architecture of this solution. So we have our databases, SQL Server, Oracle, or ODBC, as mentioned in the previous slide, that returns rows and columns from the database. It can be a raw SQL statement, or it can be a stored procedure. From there, that query is used by InfoBurst. InfoBurst is a standalone web-based application. It does have its own repository database, which can be Oracle or SQL Server. From InfoBurst, then we are going to be splitting a TWBX file. In this tutorial, InfoBurst can also be used to create TDE or hyperfiles based on the query that can be then consumed by Tableau Desktop or Tableau Server. And from there, we're going to be distributing the resulting TWBX files in this tutorial to Tableau Server. We're also going to be publishing to Tableau Server into dynamic projects and also via email. We're in Tableau Desktop. There's two ways that this workflow can go forward at this point. Using InfoBurst, you have the ability to create a hyperfile, so a data source that can be consumed by Tableau, and publish it up to Tableau Server or a network share, and use that as the basis for your workbook. So in that case, we would connect to data, go to Tableau Server, and we would select one of the hyperfiles created by InfoBurst. In this case, both of these two were created by InfoBurst, and I can use that as the basis for the workbook. Or I can connect to SQL Server, and I can just connect right here. And I have this stored procedure called get sales. I'm going to show you that in a minute. So I'm going to use that. It's just running the query here. I'm going to update it and go into extract and go to sheet 1. It's going to ask me to save the hyperfile. And from here, I can go ahead and build out my workbook. So I just connected natively through Tableau to SQL Server. Now I'm going to switch to SQL Server and show you the stored procedures. So this tutorial uses the AdventureWorks database from Microsoft. So this is a query against the AdventureWorks DW database. The stored procedure is just returning facts from the fact reseller sales table and a number of dimensions in the database. Fairly straightforward query, and that's what we're using in Tableau. The secret to getting this workflow to work to burst the resulting workbook into individual files is to also have a SQL statement that accepts a parameter. So this one is called get sales with parm, and the only difference between the two queries is further down here, you'll see we have a where clause where we're passing it the product category. So that this stored procedure does require a parameter to be passed to it containing the product category name in this instance. And just to show you how this works, I'm just going to execute the stored procedure that we're using in Tableau. We can see it returns 60,000 rows. The stored procedure we're going to be using for bursting, we pass it a category name, and in this case I'm passing it accessories, and it's returning just over 5,000 rows. With the data that we pulled from SQL Server, I've built a little dashboard here that has a number of worksheets. It has interactive filtering based on product subcategory and country. It's totally interactive. And the intent here will be to burst this workbook into 4 separate TWBX files. In this database, there are 4 product categories: bikes, clothing, components, and accessories. and we're going to burst this one workbook into 4 individual ones containing just the data for those product categories. Here's a dashboard that I built. There's a number of worksheets in it: sales by business type, sales by employee, and currency, and country. So in the sales dashboard, we're showing data for all the categories in the database. There's 4 categories. There's bikes, accessories, clothing, and components. What I want to do is break this into 4 individual TWBX files. So I have one that just has the bikes data, a second one that just has components, and so forth. The next thing I need to do is catalog that Tableau workbook in InfoBurst. So I will go to Network because I've saved it on a network share, and it's called ADWorks Sales Query Master. Click OK, and we can see it's added it to InfoBurst. I'm back in InfoBurst now. I need to open up my database connection I've already defined previously. I need to add that store procedure with parameters, so I'm going to go ahead and click on New for New Query, and I'm going to have it run the store procedure with the product, passing it the product category. Now this could be a raw SQL statement passing it a parameter as well. In this case, I'm executing a store procedure. I'm going to click on Add, and then in order to test this, I'm just going to put in one of the categories. Click on this green icon here, and InfoBurst has validated that the syntax is correct. It's returned the first 500 rows for testing purposes. So now I've got this stored proc with parm. I can use this in my burst. Let's go ahead and create the burst in InfoBurst. It's going to split that TWBX file into 4 individual files based on that SQL query. So I've just given this burst a name, burst TWBX based on SQL query, and I've also given it a description indicating that we're going to burst this into 4 individual files based on product category and publish them to Tableau server. So I have to add my source. My source in this case will be stored proc with parm stored procedure. And we can see it's automatically populated the product category parameter from that store procedure. I want to use a data source as a basis for supplying these parameters, and I have a SQL statement called categories and emails that has 1 row for each product category, and in that row I have the category name and also the email associated with that product category. The column to use is named category. Say apply, and next I have to add a delivery, and this will be going back up to Tableau server after I've split the TWBX file. So I'm going to call this Tableau server destination, as mentioned, Tableau server. I've already set up this Tableau platform in InfoBurst based on the credentials I've supplied to InfoBurst. For Tableau server, I have access to these projects. I'm going to be selecting IB Tab workflow examples as the destination. For the name, I'm going to use the macro builder, call it Sales Dashboard, and have it dynamically insert the product category. So I'll have 4 distinct names here. For the format, we're going to be selecting Tableau Package Workbook. So the TWBX to embed, this is the source TWBX that we're going to be bursting. And that's the one we just cataloged a bit earlier. It's the AdventureWorks Sales Query Master. And I'll click on Add. And once this has been added, I'm going to run this burst right away. And so now it's running through all the steps associated with bursting that TWBX file and publishing it to Tableau server. I'm going to pause this video until this is finished. Okay, we can see that the burst has completed successfully because I'm seeing all green check marks here, and the status has a green check mark as well. So now, if I switch back to Tableau server, But I'm going to go down back into workbooks here, and we can see I've got 4 separate dashboards for accessories, bikes, clothing, and components. Each one of the 4 product categories, I can see they're all different sizes, so that's a good sign, which means they probably contain different amounts of data. So if I go into the clothing dashboard, we'll have a look at this. I'll open up the dashboard itself, and let's see if we're only seeing data for clothing, and that was the goal of this exercise, is 1 TWBX file for each one of the categories. And we can see first off, by the titles of each of the worksheets, which were built to be dynamic in Tableau, I'm only seeing clothing. I'm only seeing clothing subcategories here, so that's good. I have all the functionality that I had in the original dashboard in terms of filtering the data based on any one of these different dimensions in these worksheets. I can click on one of the countries and have it filter that way. I can also hover over one of these data points and I see a viz and viz, which I built in, and that all works. So we accomplished the goal of bursting with 1 TWBX file into 4 separate workbooks. The next part of this workflow will be very similar, but a little bit different. So in practice, on Tableau Server, you can have a number of projects and sub-projects defined and assign permissions based on who should be seeing the workbooks in each one of those projects. So we're going to have InfoBurst dynamically published to different projects on Tableau Server. I'm back in InfoBurst. I've opened up the burst we just created. I'm going to add another delivery to it. And this one's going to be sending the TWBX files dynamically to different projects on Tableau Server. So I'm going to call this Tableau Server Projects. Destination will be Tableau Server, just as the previous one. So I'm going to start off by selecting a project, and it'll be the same one, IB Tab Workflow Examples. Then I'm going to use the macro builder. This is what's going to make it dynamic now. I'm going to put in a backslash, and then I'm going to add a product category name. So the goal here is when the burst is run, it's going to be looking for a folder underneath IB Tab Workflow Examples for bikes, categories, components, and accessories. If it exists, it'll place it there. If that sub-project does not exist, it's going to create it. So I'll click Apply. And for the name, just to make this a little bit different from before, I'm just going to call it Sales for, and then the product category. A little bit different name than what we had before. And the format will be Tableau Package Workbook. Again, I'll select the TWBX to embed. There we go, and click on Add. So with InfoBurst, you can have multiple deliveries for each one of the bursts you defined, and that's what we've just done here. We've added a second delivery. In this case, I only want to test the second one, so I'm going to disable the one we just did a few minutes ago. And I'm going to click on Burst Now, go to Timeline. I'm going to pause this video until the process finishes. Okay, InfoBurst has finished this delivery. I'm going to flip back into Tableau Server. Here's a moment of truth. Now I'm going to refresh the browser and see if it's created these 4 projects for me. And it has. I have a separate project created dynamically by InfoBurst, one for each of the 4 product categories. And in each one of these sub-projects, I should see a workbook called Sales For and then the product name, and I do. So we won't bother opening this workbook up. I think we've kind of proven what we wanted to do here. All right, so that was bursting a TWBX file up to Tableau Server into one project and then dynamically publishing it to different projects on Tableau Server. And this is very beneficial because you may have different permissions set up for different groups within your organization. For example, using this example, if you have an accessories department, a bikes and clothing and components department, and you only want the staff members in those departments to see the workbooks associated with those, you can use InfoBurst to dynamically publish to different areas of Tableau Server. Back in InfoBurst, I'm going to add another delivery. This one will be a little bit different from the 2 that we just did. In this case, we're going to be using email as a delivery method. And and we will be selecting email inbox. For the file name, I'm going to make it dynamic again. I'm going to say sales dash and then the product category name. For the email recipient, because the data source I'm using to supply the different categories to base the burst on also has the email address, and that was designed that way, I'm just going to select email from here. There's one email associated with each of the product categories. I'm going to go into format now, and the format here will be, before I select the format, you can see there's a number of different options available. Excel, Tableau Data Source, Tableau Package Workbook. I want to select Tableau Package Workbook, select the TWBX to embed, same as the previous two that we just ran through. So one more thing I want to do in destination, if I scroll down a bit, I can zip the attachment. So let's do that and also make this dynamic. I'm going to call it zipped report and then the product category name. So again, this is dynamic. Can add a password here. Now I can also use macros for the passwords. This is very beneficial because you could, if you're sending the output outside your organization, you could create some sort of algorithm that would be different for each of your customers and use the macro capabilities of InfoBurst to achieve that functionality. I'm just going to type in a password, and I have to make sure I check this zip attachments. So what this should do is send 4 separate emails, one to the managers of each of the product categories with the zip file attached again. The zip file will have the TWBX inside of it. Click on add, and then I'm going to run this burst. I'm going to disable the previous one that we had just run. So I'm going to disable the Tableau server projects burst and just run the email delivery. Click on burst now. I'll pause the video while this finishes. So InfoBurst has completed the processing of this delivery. I'm going to close InfoBurst out here. Switch back to my browser. I use a service called Mailtrap for testing the delivery of emails. It's a free service depending on how many emails you send with it, but it's a very useful service. So everything that I have sent went to this Mailtrap. It caught all of the emails that I sent from InfoBurst. So I've got one going to AdWorks Clothing, AdWorks Accessories, Components, and Bikes. I click on the email itself. I did not add a subject or a message for the email. If I did, it would have showed up here. But if I have a look at the attachments here, I see that I have a zipped report clothing. And if I save this to my desktop, so I've just opened up the zip file. Now if I double click on the dashboard, it's going to ask me for the password. Proof that it did encrypt the output. And double clicking on the TWBX file opened up Tableau Desktop on my local machine here, and I'm able to interact with the dashboard just like we did on Tableau Server. And so we're able to dynamically send emails using InfoBurst containing a zip file that was encrypted. The zip file had a TWBX file enclosed inside of it. That concludes this video tutorial. Thanks for watching. To learn more about Infosol and the products and services they offer, please visit infosol.com. If you'd like more information on the InfoBurst product itself, please visit help.infosol.com. There's a number of very useful articles on that site. Once again, thanks for watching.